Hi friends, I'm Dr. Rajesh Kumar from Vinova University, Department of English, Hazaribagh. Today we are going to discuss the topic Impact of Mill and Bentham on Victorian literature. It is generally accepted that the Victorian Age begins in 1837, that is the year of the ascension of Victoria as Queen to the throne of Britain, and ends in 1901 with her death. She ruled for almost 64 years. It was an era of momentous changes. Rapid industrialization was taking place, and new scientific theories were challenging the established religious beliefs. The English society itself was divided in three classes: the prosperous royalty and the nobility, the emerging middle class, and the underprivileged working class. Jeremy Bentham was born actually in 1748 and he died in 1832. He was a great political philosopher and economist. He is also called the father of utilitarianism. He advanced the prevalent term, principle of utility. His book was an introduction to the principles of morals and legislation, and it came out the same year the French Revolution occurred, that is 1789. The book presents his utilitarian theories like the greatest good of the greatest number. It has certain key assumptions. In the context of the literature we are discussing today, the first is that fact is more important than emotion or sentiment. The second is that the happiness of the community and society is more important than the happiness of the individual. The third is that a thing or even a person can be called good only if it has utility. Its philosophy derived from English empiricism, which believes that only what is evident is reliable and real knowledge. Human actions cannot be considered reliable if they do not pass the utilitarian test. The test measures the utility of a human action through its consequences or results. If it does not aim at the greatest happiness of the greatest number, it is worthless. Bentham also has talked of a model prison, which was to be called the Panopticon. It was meant to keep a sharp eye all round the clock on the prisoners to instill morality into them. Another idea was a school called the Chrestomanthia. Its curriculum was supposed to include only those subjects that were understood to be useful. James Mill was a close friend and co-thinker of Jeremy Bentham. John Stuart Mill was James's son. J.S. Mill was a sociologist, political thinker, and psychologist. He founded the Utilitarian Society and published his book Considerations on Representative Government in 1861. It focuses upon the process of creating a good government on the basis of ethics guiding human behavior. He asserts that a government cannot accomplish much if dishonest people run it. The thoughts of Bentham, James Mill, and J.S. Mill left a deep impression on the creative literature of the Victorian Age, both in denial and in concurrence. It appears that Charles Dickens swings to denial as well as concurrence. He does not agree with the dry and calculative premises of utilitarianism. Ivor Browne has written in his book Dickens in his time that industrial revolution had made the wealthy wealthier and the poor poorer. One of its consequences was that people grew indebted and were sent to prisons that were shabby, dirty, and insanitary. Dickens's father also was imprisoned for not paying debts. Imprisonment for indebtedness occurs frequently in the works by Dickens, for example, his novel Little Dorrit. Little Dorrit is also a castigation of the legal institutions and processes of England. Mill rallied for government reforms in many of his writings. Dickens satirizes the circumlocution office in bitter terms in the novel, and he writes, "No public business of any kind could possibly be done at any time without the acquiescence of the circumlocution office. Its finger was in the largest public pie and the smallest public tot. The office is extremely corrupt and inefficient." Dickens's criticism of the law courts seems to echo Bentham's opinions. Bentham had published The Art of Packing Special Juries in 1821, in which he had recorded that the base of English law was lying and nonsense. Dickens displays a similar aversion to the corrupt legal system of England in the novel. Mr. Bumble, one of the characters, declares that the law is a ass, a idiot. These are the lines in the novel itself, because Mr. Bumble speaks like that. And repeat, that the law is a ass, a idiot, because the Victorian legal opinion was that a husband is responsible for the crime committed by his wife. Dickens has also written about inhuman conditions the workers lived and worked in. Bentham and Mill too were desirous of improving conditions for the working classes. Because smaller children were less demanding and could be controlled easier, they were preferred in many of the factories. Their families needed a working hand who would add, however insubstantially, to the family income. They worked in wretched conditions. The working hours were inordinately long. Sometimes they had to work for as long as 13 hours at a stretch. There were many a time changed to the machinery, and the factory owners did not care for them or paid them if they fell sick. Dickens himself had to work in Warren's blacking factory when he was a mere child, just before his father was arrested for not paying his debt. Child Dickens received 6 shillings a week for pasting labels on shoe polish jars. It is described poignantly in his autobiographical novel, David Copperfield. Mill saw the condition of the workers in the factories as something akin to slaves. Dickens, too, in Hard Times, hints at the institutional changes to improve their conditions. Tragically, the workers try to form a union under the crooked slack bridge in the novel, but their efforts go in vain. Dickens, like Mill, disliked the pitiful condition of the ragged school meant for the children of the poor. He called them an ugly dream and found its teachers narrow-minded. The portrayal of the problems of the Cratchit children in A Christmas Carol and his dislike for Gradgrind's teaching methods in Hard Times depicts his disdain for these institutions. Hard Times opens with a command by Gradgrind which is strongly evocative of the utilitarian principles that put stress upon facts only. He says, "Now what I want is facts. Teach these boys and girls nothing but facts. Facts alone are wanted in life." In the narrative, Louisa is undesirably affected by Gradgrind's excessive preference for facts and utility. The idea of Panopticon, that is, continuous vigil upon prisoners, and the concept of chrestomantia or a utilitarian school recur in the novel through the description of Gradgrind's seminary. As we can assume that the students are no better than prisoners under his stern control, his eventual transformation seems to be futile, as Bentham also believed that people practiced asceticism only to gain honor and reputation. Another character, Josiah Bounderby, is completely lacking in sentiments. Hard Times is Dickens's formidable polemic against the fact-heavy, emotion-deficit aspects of utilitarianism. Not only Dickens, Ruskin and Matthew Arnold too disapproved of the utilitarian philosophy. Arnold attacked it in Culture and Anarchy, and he wrote, "I am delivered from the bondage of Bentham. The fanaticism of his adherents can touch me no longer. I feel the inadequacy of his mind and ideas for being the rule for human society for perfection. Even Walter Pater and D.H. Lawrence were anti-utilitarianism. The two Mills, father and son, advocated a good deal for reforms in the British government system. The Chartist movement, a movement for greater rights to the underprivileged, was inspired by some of their ideas. However, when working as a reporter at the British Parliament, Dickens was apprehensive of the Chartist movement. His fear of a mob taking over can be seen in his novel The Old Curiosity Shop. Besides him, two other Victorian novelists, Disraeli and Charles Kingsley, also were influenced by these theories. Disraeli planned three novels. Coningsby is about the inefficiency of the Whigs and Tories. Sybil describes the predicament of the working class, and Tancred deals with religious matters. Charles Kingsley's Alton Locke has a Chartist protagonist. It is about the injustices that the workers suffered in the textile industry. Another author, Elizabeth Gaskell, did not approve of Chartism, yet her novel, like Mary Barton, deals with the suffering of the working classes caused due to the policy of laissez-faire. Laissez-faire is an economic theory which proposes that there should be no government interference in business affairs. In this regard, she appears to support J.S. Mill's opinions, as he too was against the ideas of laissez-faire. A poet, a prominent poet, Elizabeth Barrett Browning, reiterated many of the views of J.S. Mill, especially on topics of slavery, political leadership, and rights for women. Mill wrote in his 1869 essay, The Subjection of Women, that the legal subordination of one sex of the other, or the legal subordination of one sex to the other, right, is wrong in itself, and now one of the chief hindrances to human improvement. Elizabeth Browning explored socio-political issues in The Seraphim and other poems. The Cry of the Children is a strong attack upon industrialization. Another poem, The Runaway Slave at Pilgrim's Point, is a dramatic monologue by a black female slave. Still another poem, A Song for the Ragged Schools of London, describes the deplorable condition of the poor children in the schools. She writes, Ragged children with bare feet, huddled up out of the coldness, on your doorsteps side by side, till your footman damns their boldness. G.B. Shaw, a playwright whose dramatic career began in earnest in the last decade of the 9th century, must have been influenced by the philosophy of J.S. Mill and Bentham. Shaw was a Fabian, and although he had denied that feminism had anything to do with utilitarianism, his own ideas matched utilitarian doctrines in matters of social democracy. The sway of Bentham and Mill is visible in many of his dramas, and also in those that project women as a superior biological and psychological entity. To conclude, we can say that on the whole, Bentham, James Mill, and J.S. Mill's ideas of classic liberalism in the guise of utilitarianism, governance principles, suffrage, labor conditions, women's rights, and other things influenced not only the polity and economic models of Victorian England, but also its literature in a major way. They cast a lasting impression on its various genres. Bye.